Hello and welcome to my tutorial on how I made the Black Mage cosplay. Now, most of what I'm about to say and do and demonstrate here has already been done by a man that goes by Duke of Dummies, linked to his DeviantArt page in the description. This video will talk about the LED eyes, but depending on response I may talk about other aspects of the costume in another video. Links will be in the description for everything that I had to buy as far as the eyes are concerned. This was not a paid sponsorship. The LEDs are from a company called Adafruit, and they are by far the single most expensive part of this cosplay. They are also very good quality. I had no problems with them whatsoever. Two things about them and why I would choose this particular brand over others. Number one, the LEDs are really close together, meaning you can fit more pixels on your face, thus meaning better expressions. And number two, the LEDs emit their light from the edge rather than from the face of the strip, meaning you can turn the strips on the edge and have a better chance of seeing through it than your classic LED strips. And this is everything else I had to buy for the eyes. Now, Duke of Dummies was able to use an Arduino trinket, but I wanted to use a Wii nunchuck controller rather than make my own controller, so I ended up using an Arduino Uno and adding a Wii nunchuck adapter to it. You'll also need a bunch of resistors, capacitors, jumper cable wires, and I wanted a quick disconnect so I could separate the goggles from my control center of a brick. And this is the pinout for a USB connection. I decided to use this because I already had a cell phone charger that uses USB. You can use any battery you want as long as it's 5 volts. Now the goggles are your standard ski goggles where there are 2 lenses. Often you'll see them labeled as dual lenses or anti-fog lenses. But the idea is still the same. There are 2 lenses separated by a gap. My idea with this is to put the LEDs in slots so that the LEDs themselves are between the 2 lenses, and the innermost lens is holding the strip steady. You will notice that the lines I've marked here to be cut with my Dremel tool are not uniformly spaced. This is because I'm ultimately going to snake the LEDs along the lines, meaning that the wide gaps have the LEDs facing each other, and the narrow gaps don't have any LEDs between them. Here's what the goggles look like after I've used a Dremel tool to cut along the lines, but before I've had a chance to rinse all the dust and debris between the lenses out. And here's what the finished goggles look like. You will note the drop of hot glue over here. That's to help stabilize everything. And I also had to melt a bigger hole in the goggle frames just to fit the wires through. And here's a little map of where each and every pixel is for the goggles. You will note that the very first pixel is labeled 0. And also, the narrow gaps at the bottom are labeled with 1 quote-unquote dead pixel, and the top is labeled with 2 quote-unquote dead pixels to span the gaps. And here is what the default eyes look like when I turn on just the ones that I need to turn on. And this is the basic diagram of connections provided by Adafruit in their Überguide, link in the description. This is useful for uploading your code from your computer to the Arduino chip. And this is what I use when I'm actually wearing the costume. The strip of LEDs by Adafruit actually have 2 ground wires, so one of them will have to go back to the battery bank, and one of them will go to the spare ground port on the Arduino Uno board. You'll also need an extra cable from the positive end of the battery bank to the Arduino board in order to power it. Also, if you are using a Wii nunchuck like I am, you just plug them in on the last 4 pins labeled analog. I added electrical tape to the wires to give it some durability around the box, and added some zip ties on the inside of the box so that I can't accidentally pull the wires out from the box. Next, let's talk about the code. So there's going to be 2 GitHub links in the description. One is from Duke of Dummies, who did the original work on the Black Mage eyes. The next is from a person that goes by Fritzing, who does a lot of work with the Wii Nunchuck. Essentially what we're going to do is combine the two together so they play nice. So originally here, you will notice that there's a bunch of new definitions, all new commands to make the Wii Nunchuck work. Now, the logic to how this all works is that each expression starts with a blast of some color. In my case, everything blasts as black, because that's going to be the majority of everything that I have. After that, you have to assign each individual pixel a specific color, as defined here. Now, the color itself is defined as red, green, and blue, and each individual number can go up to 255. The problem is that you don't want it to be that high. One, because that'll drain your battery a lot faster, and two, the lights do reflect back on your own eyes, so the brighter you're trying to emit forward, the brighter it is going to blind you with. You will also notice that during this setup, there's going to be a blast of white. That means that during the initial startup here, all pixels will show white for just a split second here. This is done so you can visually tell when the setup ends and the loop begins. At the start of the loop, the program will get a number for all the different positions for the buttons and the analog stick. Now, it is suggested that you run the example that Fritzing supplies to get an idea of what the range of numbers should be. I happen to get numbers between 30 and 220 for X and Y, where the middle was about 125. When I want to be angry, I decided to give myself a little buffer of 30 units, so I decided to have it between those 2 points here. So not only is the analog stick pointing up really high, it's also not leaning too far to the left or right. And here's an example of showing an animation for an expression, in this case, dizzy. To start, you blast everything black, so all the pixels are black. Then you set each individual pixel to be the right expression, show it, and the key here is that you delay it a little bit, then you again blast it black, set the pixels to be the correct color, show it, to delay again, and repeat for however many frames you want the animation to have. Note that the animation cannot be interrupted. Now that you have a basic understanding of how to code for each expression, let's talk about how to map them to different parts of the controls. So in this setup here, I have wink dedicated to holding left for the analog stick and the top button on the controller. In this case, since it's a nunchuck, I'm holding down the C button. So how I came up to this orientation of all the different emotions, first I wanted blink to be the easiest expression. Just a quick flick down the controller. Next, I wanted to be able to transition between the extreme and colorful emotions from an easy expression before it. And the only way I found to do that reliably is to first hold down both the top and bottom buttons, C and Z, and then release the C button so I'm only holding down the Z button, which is a lot easier to maintain, and I figured I needed to maintain the extreme emotions for a lot longer than their less colorful counterparts. Everything else in this is completely arbitrary. For example, I decided this expression that was more angry than this expression, and so on and so forth. And that's it for this video. Again, depending on the reception of this video, I may want to do a little bit explaining the hat and the rest of the outfit. I will try to answer any questions as best I can in the comments below. But enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye, everyone.